is called The View from the Bridge. And the reason for that is because they've all held leadership roles or continue to hold leadership roles. And we wanted to take this to the 35,000 level. So I guess we'll start out with, Admiral Allen, what are the top 3 things that keep you awake at night?
Let me go back to what I worried about when I had a uniform on.
Okay.
We've got a problem with terrorism in the world, and it really hasn't invaded the maritime environment that much. When I was Commandant of the Coast Guard, I had one essential element of information that I wanted to know. I wanted to know if we ever got an indication the Tamil Tigers were meeting with Al-Qaeda, because the Tamil Tiger is the most effective waterborne lethal force in the world. And when somebody found them and started using their tactics, I wanted to know. I think we have an issue with UAVs. Ships are vulnerable, they're soft targets. We tried to harden them around the Gulf of Aden with the piracy issues and so forth, but they still remain soft targets around the world. And the combined impacts of electronics, cyber, GPS jamming, spoofing, the ability basically to deny sensor and communications to a ship, things that are subject to electromagnetic interference.
Thank you, Admiral. Kirsi, what keeps you awake at night?
Maybe not keep me awake, but the things I think about are really there and work on are the 3 big ones for shipping. And as we did hear from the last panel, obviously environmental regulations is a big challenge for the industry. And then we have the geopolitical tensions in the world that have a big impact on shipping as well. And then the last one would be digital transformation that the previous panel also discussed.
Cynthia?
Well, those of you that have heard me before know that I'm going to say the 3 biggest things are really cyber, cyber, and cyber. Not because cyber is unfaceable, but our clients and I think the shipping sector in general have shown a delay or a reluctance to understand and adopt what they need in terms of methodology to face the risk. And we believe that this means that the owners we serve, which are really good, are working so hard with problems they do understand and can understand, and are maybe forgetting an area that creates a tremendous vulnerability and a threat to their assets. So while they're working hard here to preserve value, they have a door open that will allow value to drain out or to be really destroyed to some measure, in some measure by one fell swoop. So that's what's bothering me. I'm trying to get over it, but
No, we need that protection. Nicky, what do you feel are the top 3 issues that either keep you awake or might?
Well, I'm not a technical person, but I've been around for a long time, so I have a lot of knowledge on about a whole host of topics. But what keeps me awake at night is we have seen, since I've been in the industry for 65 years, I've seen many changes. We all have. But we are ramping up the amount of work we expect our crew to do, and they're expected to do it 7 days a week, 24/7, to the best of their ability, with deadlines and so forth. Tons of stress. I'm worried that we are going to get to the point where we don't have crew who are high enough technically competent or trained to be able to go to deal with these problems. Since I have the microphone, allow me, Cynthia, to ask you a question which has been burning in my mind for a long time, which is, we all talk about the Internet of Things and big data. Has anybody put a value on what big data is worth in dollars in terms of what a ship generates? Are we worrying about something that's major or minor?
that was such a good question. There is an advertisement in the United States about MasterCard, like Visa. and they give you different snapshots. What is a diamond ring worth, and what is that worth? And then what is the experience worth? And they say priceless. So I would say, from a big data point of view, to the extent that that data provides real information, it's our data, it's our intellectual property, it's our business dealings, and it's our cargoes for our clients, it's our vessels, it's our seafarers, number one. I would say priceless. And yes, then how is it vulnerable, and what will happen when and if we are attacked in some way and lose it? Is it devastating? It can be. Is it annoying? Perhaps only that.
Well, given the many disruptions, given the many disruptions that you've all illuminated and that are occurring in today's shipping arena, these are geopolitical disruptions, as mentioned, operational, digital, cyber, environmental, and more. Which of those do you feel are going to have the greatest impact on shipping? Nicky?
May I be politically incorrect?
I want you to be.
Well, if somebody is not going to read a security briefing, I think that's one of the major holes in security. It's not just not prepared to read it, but is the person in charge able to understand it? Because turning the clock back to when GMDSS came in, I said to myself that we will have to start putting on ships an electronic officer who's qualified and competent and able to deal with this increasing magnitude of complexity and responsibility. I didn't come up with a good answer because I looked for one, I couldn't find one. But of course, I wasn't sure of what I was looking for.
So essentially, you're saying we need the technical expertise to run the electronic and digitalization changes that are occurring in our industry today.
Yes, but then Cynthia will change her job.
We didn't say it came with security. Cynthia, what do you think is going to have the most profound impact on shipping, or has your answer not changed?
No, I don't think cyber will have the most profound impact on shipping. I think that where we are is in a geopolitical environment that, as you can see, I mean, we see it in all of our newspapers every day, there are trade wars and there are sanctions. And so this means a vessel owner, for example, can be very surprised that a trade he's deeply involved with, committed to, and earning money from, on which he's counting for years, is suddenly not a trade available to him and can result actually in the freezing of his assets and his vulnerability to losing his business very quickly. Obviously there are some times when a vessel owner understands that this could happen and takes a risk, but there are other times when a vessel owner fully is unaware that this is the danger or that this is an imminent danger, and so is just conducting business as usual. I'm afraid that sanctions are going to have an impact, and trade wars in a way behind it, because it shifts how we move goods, where, how frequently, and it takes some of the power of those trading relationships out of traditional hands and puts them into hands of government.
Kirsi, you've got almost a bird's eye view on a myriad of issues. What do you think is going to have the most profound, or is having the most profound impact on shipping?
Well, maybe I'll continue with the bird's eye view. I agree with Nicky and Cynthia. There are a number of impacts in the shorter term, but in the long term, I think the ambitions that IMO has for 2050 for the greenhouse gas reduction is going to dramatically change the shipping we know today. And the reason I'm saying that is we do not have solutions to get there today. And all the decisions that we make going towards 2030 have to be made keeping in mind what the 2050 will require. And it's going to require some dramatic, radical changes in the industry and also in the physical ships that we operate.
Thad, anything you wanted to add?
Maybe to put a finer point on the first two comments, what have really created step functions in our society in the last 100 years when we converge two technologies that take us someplace we hadn't expected. The PC was a major breakthrough, but it was nothing until we got the internet and the connectivity associated with it. Then we have increased computation capability, and then you get into how much data you can handle. So when I look at out in the future in disruption, I think more along the lines of, and I mentioned it in a couple other meetings, we don't know what it's like to be digital citizens. We don't know what it's like to be digital nations. We don't know what it's like to be a digital population on Earth. If you look at the convergence of data, use of spectrum, quantum computing, and then the ability to generate artificial intelligence, as those all combine, they're going to create the art of the possible for what things are going to look like in 2030 and 2050. They're going to be disruptive in ways that we haven't even thought of yet. We're challenged right now to figure out how legal structures, the Constitution, whatever, apply on the internet. If you look at the collision regulations, they're analog. There's a requirement for a lookout. And the overarching thing in the coal regs is an ordinary practice of seamen. I don't know what that is in 2050 with artificial intelligence.
Thank you. Earlier in this forum, we talked about restoring trust in our industry. What steps do you feel shipping needs to take in order to retain its social license and gain the trust and respect of society in order to continue to do what we do in providing the engines of global trade? Kirsi?
In the previous panel, it was mentioned how efficient shipping is in terms of carrying the majority of the worldwide trade. And we all know that. We also know that the emissions from international shipping is less than 3% of the total emissions. So it's remarkable what shipping can do. However, with the expected trade growth, with the population growth, and the expansion of the seaborne transportation, the emissions will grow faster than in other industries if we continue shipping as usual. And therefore, this is an area I think we have an opportunity to really show to the general public how good shipping can be by taking early action. And we have general public and customers worldwide who are increasingly interested in knowing what is the carbon footprint of the products that they buy. And because of that, shipping cannot operate in isolation. We need to be part of it, not alone. Again, it was mentioned that charterers have a role to play, and the entire logistics chain has a role to play. But I think this is an area that is a challenge, a huge challenge, but could also be an opportunity for shipping.
Thank you. Nicky, did you know?
Politically incorrect.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, I think that if we are in a trade war now, it's the first time that we're at war for votes. We have two protagonists in this discussion. One I don't think understands exactly how the other operates. I think both of them are semi-blind. The reality is that China is a communist state, and but they have managed to get to the second spot in the world economy. After all, you know, when you are able to rack up 10 consecutive years with 18.1% GDP increase, I might be wrong on the figures. That's an incredible achievement. And hundreds of millions have been removed from abject poverty to a life which they didn't have before. Nobody likes to be told what to do, but they put up with it because the alternative with those who are old enough, who remember the situation, how it was before, think they're better off than they were now. Thank you.
Cynthia, what do you think shipping can do to restore the trust in our industry?
I think it's two things: to understand what our society wants and try to get ahead of it, but it's also communication, because we're doing an awful lot right now. How is that actually communicated in a unified voice to our general public? Is it communicated well? Is it very fragmented? Is it very much a nation by nation or segment of the industry by segment of the industry communication process? I mean, we cannot fault society for passing judgment if it simply doesn't have the information to understand what we are doing. So, yeah, there's still that issue of lagging behind, but if we could form some sort of a lobby, it's probably a bad word, to speak in a better way to our communities, I think that would do us an awful lot of good.
Sort of like a maritime communications consortium.
Yeah, I think that was well
I'll
said.
work on it. I'll work on it. Thad, as a regulator and putting your uniform back on, what do you think shipping could be doing better?
Well, the advice I would give is the same advice. Actually, it's the direction I gave to the people working in the Coast Guard when I was a commandant. Transparency of information breeds self-correcting behavior. Period.
Okay, thank you. What do you believe as a group are the most effective ways to eliminate substandard shipping? Is it support, is big data an answer? Is increased transparency, as Admiral Allen mentioned? Additional sanctions? More reporting requirements? What do you feel are tools that we could be deploying better in order to eliminate substandard shipping? Kirsi?
Sure. I believe that regulation has a role to play in that. As long as the regulation is well designed, if it provides a level playing field and it doesn't distort trade, and also it's very important that the enforcement of the regulation is uniform around the world.
Well, investors and charterers using data that is made transparent, but the data has to be properly collected and properly analyzed to provide real information, and there has to be an understanding and buy-in from the maritime industry to say, yes, when I see that score, it is for a reason, not a mysterious algorithm that no one understands that we are then judged with or judged by. But I think it is transparency. I think that's where it leads.
Thad, did you want to add to your?
Well, we mentioned this at our table. It might be interesting to see what would happen if we took all the parameters associated with shipping and put it in blockchain.
Very interesting.
Total transparency can't be changed. It is what it is.
Interesting. Nikki, what do you think?
Well, if I may, I'd like to make an iconoclastic comment, which is that substandard shipping will never be totally eliminated for a very simple reason. As an owner, the World Food Program has to take food to Yemen, and I wouldn't risk my crew there. So some Cambodian flagged ship is useful.
Okay. Well, that's certainly an element of supply and demand, and perhaps the demand can decrease, which would certainly benefit all of us. Is there a point beyond which the emphasis on financial performance, I mean, Cynthia, you just mentioned the investors and investment banks and bankers. Is there a point beyond which that the emphasis on financial performance has gone too far. In other words, bean counteritis, I call it. Has it or will it compromise safety? Nicky?
Well, I think that we live in a world where some bankers revise their views quarter to quarter. And how is shipping going to be able to live with that? It's difficult enough. The Admiral mentioned data. Communications from ship to shore. If they have to do it on a big basis, in a short time, it's going to be difficult. Yeah. The spectrum is going to be overloaded. As it is, I think we all live in an age of overload of information.
Okay.
Sifting through the information. Somebody says you can't see the forest because of the trees.
Yeah, that was a good point. Cynthia, what do you think? Have we gone too far with focus on financial performance, and are we affecting safety?
Well, there's nothing wrong with financial performance. That's why we're all in business. We need to make money. We want to make money. I think that the issue is, what are the goalposts? In other words, money at any cost by doing anything, or are there parameters beyond which we will not go? And who is the person that will enforce it? Is it regulations and regulators? Or again, are they people with social conscience is like investors or charterers who will say, because it is our decision to charter your vessel, we are not going to accept environmental performance like this or technical performance like that. But so the financial performance per se is not the problem. It's having common goalposts that are understood, recognized, and then properly enforced.
Mm-hmm. Kirsi, we've been in a shipping recession since 2008. What are you seeing as a classification society and as an RO?
It's been a very long period of both low charter rates and freight rates that I understand do not always even cover the operational costs, not to even mention the capital costs. So it's understandable that there's a lot of focus on cost control. And in many ways, that's a good thing. Because if it does translate, for example, into reduced fuel consumption, it also gives us environmental benefits, as we've seen with the CO2 emissions reduced from 2012 on. Now, obviously, we get often asked if we see any issues in reduced maintenance because of the tough years. And we must say that we have not seen a trend very, very good in that regard. So we haven't seen any
financial performance and putting a premium on cost controls. I think it has to be aligned with company culture and organizational structure that allows you to do the right thing regardless of cost. I'm reminded of a case I worked where we had a perverse incentive because the engineering officer on a ship was graded mostly on his cost controls. That included not changing the filters in the oil and water separator or working around it because he reduced his costs. He was incentivized to do that. If you're going to do this, it's got to be aligned so the behavior of the people that are actually running the ships are aligned not only financially but culturally.
You know, we've been talking today about all of the innovation that's been going on, and there is a tremendous amount. How can we best incorporate these initiatives, many of which are coming from outside the industry? For instance, we talked about how ballast water, those were terrestrial-based technologies that try to translate into ships. You could talk about land-based IT that doesn't understand it has to deal with satellite systems. How can we best move forward as an industry, continue to innovate, and recognize that we're talking about shipping, and shipping is different? Kirsi?
I think I'd like to maybe talk about different drivers for technologies. So if we have a regulatory-driven technology such as ballast water treatment systems, it's so dependent on the quality of the regulation, what we get in terms of the lead time, in terms of the certainty that the regulation provides to both the manufacturers of the systems as well as the owners who buy the systems. So that's one aspect on technology, and the only answer I have for that is we need to be able to produce better regulation. On the other hand, there's technology that is being introduced to the industry in kind of anticipation of regulation, but not really to respond to regulation yet. And that's, for example, some aspects of autonomous shipping, new types of fuels, and there are many pilot projects around the world. And I see that there are some national governments and regions that really incentivize this type of pilots. And I think these regional areas can be a testing ground for new technology before they get implemented into the worldwide shipping. And I think that's actually a good model for new technology.
Okay. Cynthia, along these lines, with innovations and new technologies comes risk.
Absolutely, but the vessel owners are not strangers to risk, and I think one of the earlier panelists said it so well. We live with risk and manage around risk and manage risk every day. And so we are with our heads in the sand like the ostrich if we think that the risk will not evolve along with the technology. That's why I'm like to say that it is better to look at it, analyze it, identify it, assess it, and face it and figure out how we can mitigate that risk and then in fact manage it to our benefit. So I completely agree with you, new risks for the new technology.
And Nicky, with your 65 plus years, you've seen a lot of change in this industry. Do you feel that we are at a period of tremendous change greater than we've seen before? Or is this something that shipping can just assimilate because we're used to evolving?
I think we'll have to learn to live with it, but I think that along the way, if the load gets heavier and the impact more significant, we're going to have to rein in the horse and see where we've got to and where we're going to get to. I would like to say that we just had European elections and the Green Party has done very well. A little observed comment that I noticed in a comment by one of the Green people who got elected was that by 2050, we want the emissions to reduce by 50%. Now, these people are going to have political power, and that can translate to an impact for us, on us. Of course, as Karen pointed out to me, in 2050 I'll be 111, so
well, good.
It doesn't matter.
We'll look forward, we'll ask you again in 2050. How's that?
If I'm still around, I'll be delighted and honored to come.
With all of, Thad, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, well, let me say first, until last year, every time I gave a speech, I'm going to say I'm going to be very frank because I'm retired and my pension's assured. Now I just say I'm retired because of the government shutdown. Every time I hear the word regulation, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me. When the Costco Busan hit the bridge in San Francisco, it was probably 17 years after Open 90, and we still we did not have the non-tank vessel rule out. And I got wire brushed all over the hill. I openly implemented controls on people entering based on international requirements and treaties we had signed because it was the only tools I had. Anybody that mentioned the word innovation and regulation in the same sentence, that's an oxymoron. We have to do something about regulatory reform and how fast we can get these rules out, and whether it's a bigger role in working with the private sector where the innovation normally occurs and how we actually bring that in. But in my view, inside the Administrative Procedures Act in the U.S. is broken. I tried for 4 years as a commandant to fix it. I don't think there's been any change to it. We were working on the standards for ballast water when I became a flag officer in 1996. It's crazy. It needs to be fixed.
Okay, I agree with you, believe me. So we've talked about the challenges, and we've talked about some opportunities, and we've talked about new technology, and we've touched on regulation. I hope I took enough of a breath in between regulatory and technology and innovation. But how are we going to attract talent into this industry? How are we going to attract the next generation of mariners, officers, shoreside personnel into this industry? Are we concerned about it? What is the face of shipping as we move forward? And how do we achieve things like work-life balance in an industry that's 24/7, 365? Kirsi, have you been looking at this?
Well, shipping obviously has to compete with other industries for talent. And there are industries today that are probably, at least from a technical point of view, since I have a technical background, seen a little bit more sexier, more exciting than shipping. And on the other hand, I think we live in such an interesting time in shipping right now that I'd love to be a young engineer entering shipping today. I think there's so many challenges which also bring opportunities, but we do need to modernize the image of shipping a little bit more. In terms of the work-life balance, it can be tough, but it can be done.
I think that to attract young people are already thinking about the future. They're there already. They're here to stay. They think about the world differently than we do, and they want to find challenges in industries that answer their understanding about the future. So if we want to attract real talent, they have to see what it is that is our vision for the future and where they're going to be in 10 and 20 and 30 years. Otherwise, they will choose an industry who does offer them that.
Nicky, what do you think we need to do for attracting new talent?
Allow me to say, I'm a very keen proponent of more cadets on ships, because they're tomorrow's officers. And while they're cadets, they have acquired some experience. I know that cost accountants love to look at reducing maintenance costs, and one of the items they focus on is crew reduction. I think that's about the dumbest thing that one can do. You might be cutting dollars off a cost, but you're building in a problem for a ship that could be a snowball. It could be millions of dollars. You know the old English saying, for lack of a nail, the horse went lame. For lack of the horse, the battle was lost.
The battle was lost. Thank you. Thad?
I think we need to understand that the shipping industry is not like the manufacturing industry. Capital is always going to look for the lowest labor cost. If you're making athletic apparel, you've got options. When you're looking at jobs that have a technical aspect to them, even if it may be a lower level technical aspect, you just can't shift that around. We had a conversation, it was earlier today, and frankly, if you go to some of the Middle Eastern countries, what you see is a majority of third country nationals. They're doing all the lower level work. Sooner or later, you got to come to grips with the quality of your workforce, what you want that workforce to do, and how you source it. And you can't pivot in the shipping industry and go to the next country because that's lower cost of capital and expect those workers to come in and be competent. You're going to have to get over that. somehow.
Well, speaking of the face of shipping, if you will, the United States Coast Guard, I'm very proud of the United States Coast Guard, in case you haven't realized that by now, has done a tremendous job recruiting into the Coast Guard Academy. And I think this incoming class was 38% women and minorities. What are some of the secrets that the Coast Guard has deployed to create a diverse work corps?
This is really a complex discussion. First of all, we can take great pride in the strides that we've made. We still have work to do in mid-career, retaining women, and maintaining women until they become flag officers, and I'm still hoping for the first female commandant. So it's a life cycle of that career that you really have to work on. We're not doing too bad at the entry point, especially at the academy. What I'm concerned about is the first 5 years, and then they start making decisions about families and where their career wants to go. We just had RAND complete a study that gave us some substantial recommendations on how to address that. They're actively being considered. But I think beyond that, I think the mission has a lot to do with it. The fact that we execute our mission where we live, we're kind of deployed where we live. There are a lot of things that link us to the community. There's a sense of family because of the size of the service. It's easy to feel like a family when you know somebody wherever you go. That does not take away the hardship of family separation, living on barrier islands where there's reduced access. I think we've got the mission side right. What we don't have right is the culture and the work rules related to retaining women at mid-career.
Okay, thank you. Kirsi, what thoughts do you have about diversity in our industry?
Shipping is definitely still a male-dominated industry, but I'd like to say only in numbers, because there are a lot of women in very important positions, both in companies and in ship owner organizations, in maritime administrations, Coast Guard. So I do believe that we've gone a long way. It doesn't mean that we don't have work to do, like Admiral said. But I do believe that we're making progress, because when I think about during my career, I've never worked for a woman. I've never had a supervisor who is a woman. And very few times I've had women working for me. And I think that means that I really didn't have role models at all. And I think it's important to have role models and people that you feel that you can talk to and find out how they solve some of the mid-career challenges that some of the challenges for women are different than for men. We can't get around that. And I think the role model, we will have more and more of that, and I think that will help us to keep the women in our industry past mid-career.
Thank you. Cynthia is president of WISTA, Delaware River Bay.
Yeah, I'm very committed to women succeeding in the maritime industry, and there are a lot of women that are, but the diversity issue is a bit different, and bringing young people in from all different cultures and backgrounds. And so I can really only speak to the little bit that I'm involved with, but this is, I think, an indicator of something that can be done. So in Philadelphia area, where we work as our headquarters, there is a Maritime Academy charter high school that draws from inner city children, many of them with very difficult backgrounds, definitely extremely diverse. And the idea is to recruit them at elementary school level, so they're coming in at 6 years of age. And does this mean they all go into the maritime industry? Absolutely not. But what the difference is with the children who actually end up to graduate either from primary school or secondary school is they have heard about the shipping industry. Now in Greece that may not be as big a problem, but in the United States, people think that the river is for going on Saturday to buy a hot dog. They don't understand that we have a shipping industry. The children that graduate from this school do. And now this year, the graduates will have one going into the Navy, two going into the Coast Guard, and one or two going to maritime academies, merchant maritime academies. A tremendous achievement for kids who 10 years ago would not even know those opportunities were available. So for me, it's get them young, do it grassroots, tell them what they can do and could achieve if they were shown, give them those opportunities at a young age. And then even if they don't pursue, they may pass that word to a brother, a sister, or someone in the neighborhood. Little by little by little. It's a seeding process.
Nicky, are you in favor of more diversity in shipping?
Personally, yes. I was attending one of the AMVER functions 2 years ago, and the lady captain of Captain Sacco's ship, who rescued people under very perilous conditions, was honored. And I think that I speak honestly and openly from the point of view of the people she rescued. They couldn't give a damn if she was a woman or if she was an astronaut.
Yeah.
They just were grateful that they were under competent hands and able to be saved.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for your contributions today, the view from the bridge. It's a positive one, it's a growing one, and we're moving forward. And please help me thank our panelists today.